Hi, I'm Tova Tanner of Royal Cohesive Network. We are a nonprofit organization that work with youth in the local community. Our four cornerstones of sustainability are literacy, youth entrepreneurship, homeschool hub, and also gardening. Our mission is to engage people in educational and professional development to enhance sustainability. You can visit our website at www.royalnetwork.org, or you can follow us on Facebook. You can also email us at info@royalnetwork.org.
Hello everyone, I'm Kelvin Tiller, owner of Tiller's Mixed Martial Arts here in Kansas City, Kansas. Here at Tiller's Mixed Martial Arts, I offer boxing, kickboxing, Muay Thai, Jiu-Jitsu, wrestling, and strength and conditioning. We have affordable pricing for adults and children. I am open Monday through Saturday, so please come out and support, and I hope to see you soon.
Hi, I'm Adrienne Curry.
Hi, and I'm Florence Curry.
And we are the owners of Longevity Nutrition.
Longevity Nutrition is a company that serves healthy shakes, energizing teas, sports nutrition, and we would like to offer you good nutrition.
What better way than to think about your health and become healthier? We're here to service you. We're open Monday through Friday, 6:30 to 5, and Saturdays, 8 to 3.
Yes, and we're going to work on that good nutrition inside out.
That's right.
This episode of Listen Up is sponsored by Legends Comedy Club and Sports Lounge, Kansas City's premier black-owned comedy club where the laughs are on us and the experience is second to none.
Pine Hill Productions, providing voiceover and narration for your production needs.
All right. Councilman Brandon Ellington. All right. Well, I'm glad to have you on the show, man. I've been looking forward to getting you on here, or even really just I enjoy having a chance to just have dialogue with you, but to have you on the show and have dialogue so the audience can hear some of the things that we talk about, man, I'm really looking forward to this. One of the things I can say I can appreciate, 2019 was my first year really being up close with politics, and to be able to see, to have met you, and to be able to see you do what it is that you do, I have to say this, man, is that you are kind of like, for me, the image of what a politician should be like. If people haven't seen you on social media and seeing you interact with the community, then they haven't seen what politics should look like. So I really appreciate that, man. I commend you for that. But if you could just kind of introduce yourself to the people and everything, and tell us what the title of being a councilman is.
Cool. was a hard one to start with. So I'm gonna start with the introduction, just to give a little backdrop. So like you said, in 2019, you got involved in politics. I got involved in politics around the time I was 25, 26. I was hustling. I was watching the police go in people's pockets, take their dope, take their money, leave the dope in their pocket, leave them out there. I used to run up on stops. People, when they got stopped, they used to argue with the police, going back and forth about people's rights. And then when I was 27, 28, I ran for office. I ran for office for two reasons. One, the person that was running in my area didn't live in that district, and I was like, you can't represent me. And two, I want to show people how we can actually actualize and control our own destiny. Because in America, politics is what gives you laws. Policy comes from the laws that you're given, and then circumstances fall from that. And I want to show us that we can control our own circumstances by controlling our own laws, which gives us our policies, which reflects everything.
Right. I like that. Now, you know what I think was really cool too is that you grew up in an environment where most, especially young black men, think that they wouldn't be able to do what it is that you do. Because like when I first met you, I think because I met you in the environment that we were in, with you running for office, I would have never guessed that you was involved in politics. And I'm pretty sure you probably get that stereotype sometimes, you know.
I get it all day long, and it's real, and I usually argue this. I usually argue the separation between black culture and African American culture. And I consider myself black, Aborigine, a man of color. You can call me any of those. You can't call me African American, because that's not my culture, and that's an oxymoron to me. And it would go to the same in politics. So the reason that you don't see more people that come from climates and cultures that we come from that get involved is because they listen to people that look like them that come from a different culture, which is a misunderstanding, again, of politics, because politics is about who controls what. And the reason I got involved is because I want to show people that came from the same circumstances that I came from that we can control everything around us. Because, again, politics controls laws, which creates policies, which creates circumstances. And I understood that my circumstances was all related to the way, and again, going back to law enforcement, it's illegal to sell drugs, but I was literally watching them take people's drug money, let them keep their dope. So I knew the law had nothing to do with the morality around dope sales. That had everything to do with the economic impact. And that would be the same when we talk about probation and parole, when we talk about the jail system, when we talk about the legal system, when we talk about the financial system, banks, stores, the whole nine. To me, it all breaks down from policies and what we don't control.
Okay. I agree with that. Now, so a councilman. So what is a councilman? What is it that you do? What's the job description?
All right, so it's twofold. The job description, technically, I'm supposed to go to committee. I'm supposed to vote on things Wednesday through Thursday, and then you typically don't see people. And I'm not talking about anybody on the council. What I do is a little different, though. So I do my typical council regime, which is making sure that the city runs. So we do our appropriations Wednesday and Thursday. It's pretty much standard business every Wednesday and Thursday as far as making sure the city operates, because we have to do appropriations every week. And then I do the No More Excuses Coalition on Mondays, which we engage in working on the culture and social settings in our community, and that breaks down the politics, how we interact with ourselves, the type of institutions that we want and what we invest our money and our time in. Then I have a couple nonprofits that I support, GYRL, Young Kings, and Young Princes program. So I typically volunteer my time on Saturdays, and I consistently try to organize in the community. So with the No More Excuses Coalition, all the entities and organizations that I'm working with, I'm meeting them where they're at, and we're either collaborating in entities in which we can, or I'm helping them grow, which helps me grow the community too. So it depends on where the organization is at, but we've been doing events since I've been on the council.
That sounds busy.
A little bit.
That sounds busy. That sounds busy. But you know, I'm glad to hear you say that, man, because you know, I've been involved, you know, with mentoring and things like that with the Hickman Mill School District, the Kansas City School District, and with Girl, as you know, and when I say I'm glad to hear you say that is because I've been mentoring. Let's see, I moved here in Kansas City in 1992, and when I started getting involved with mentoring here locally, it's rare that you see us involved in the mentoring program and mentoring. And it was sad to me because even when I was working with the schools, it was a lot of the teachers that would stay after school because they wouldn't have people volunteering to work with a lot of the kids. So let me ask you this. With what it is that you do in the organizations that you work with, what would you like to see, from the community as far as like getting involved and helping out and doing the things that you do?
Now it's time for me to go ahead and get in trouble. I would actually like to see the community care about themselves. Right. So what you just said is when you talk about Afrocentric males lacking in mentor programs, that's our fault. The same we talk about lack of sports, lack of education, lack of anything that we have. Right. We're quick to blame somebody that doesn't look like us for our situation. Mm-hmm. Now I grew up learning how to take baking soda, water, and some other substances and make money off of, right? So that means there is no excuses, right or wrong, for what you want to have. I know a whole bunch of people that grew up in similar circumstances that I grew up in that's willing to take life chances for a small amount of dollars. But we're not willing to take those same life chances to control everything around us. Right. So we don't control our housing, can't blame white folks for that. Mm-hmm. We don't control our education, can't blame white folks for that. We don't control our banking, can't blame white folks for that. Now, we can blame institutions for redlining certain areas. We can blame institutions for not reallocating resources, but we still choose to support those. Right. Whether that's education, we send our kids to schools that we say don't teach our curriculum. Whether that's sporting entities, we say they treat us like slaves, but we don't take the time to only support our own businesses or our own sport endeavors. Right. So what I would like to see from the people is more proactive action. And I say that with all aggression that I have. I got in politics when I was 27. I done pretty much dedicated myself to trying to help people in similar circumstances that I come from, trying to deconstruct institutions that I believe was embedded in racist dogma, and also have a serious colonizing aspect to it, whether it's corrections or what have you. But what I find more often than not is a whole bunch of people be like, man, we appreciate what you do, but when it's time to show up and show these folks that I'm not just talking, that I'm actually representing a whole bunch of folks, well, we got stuff to do. Right. But we can't get anything institutionally done if we don't find it important enough to put our time and energy into it. Right. And that goes to everything. So when we talk about sports, mentorship, I'll give you an example. A few years ago, I came through the inner city, and I was like, man, I cut a deal with Parks. This is before I got on the city council. I was a state rep. I was like, I cut a deal with Parks and Rec. They're going to allow me to utilize all of their community centers, right, on a rotating schedule. I only need 4 coaches. 4 coaches. I do an AAU league, and I don't want anything to do with the finances. I don't want anything to do with the money. I don't want anything to do with the ticket sales. I don't want anything to do with anything dealing with dollars. Y'all can break that down, and y'all can cut the dollars between Park and Rec and yourselves. You know what happened after that meeting? What's that? No coaches showed up, right? So Park and Rec was on board. They was comfortable doing whatever deal that they had to do with the coaches. They was comfortable allowing me to have a rotating schedule. And again, this is before I was on the council. Right. So it's not like I was using my council position to leverage. No, I just went in there and said, I want to utilize the community centers. And I got some coaches that would come in. But I didn't have the coaches that would be dedicated to show up and coach youth that look like us. Right. And that's the irritation, and I want to, open up the can. So let's go down the road.
But let me ask you this though. Do you think we have like just too many laws? Like, do you think that some of the laws that we have put in place may sometimes get in the way of us doing some of the things that we would like to be able to do?
Yes, wholeheartedly. But again, that boils back down to excuse, right? So laws or policies. Institutions build a system. Okay. Right? System is not independent of institutions. So when we have policies that are non-constructive to our situation, you deconstruct those, you get rid of those. And I use the penitentiary as an easy example. The majority of black and brown folks ended up serving time in the penitentiary via numbers. Majority of white folks do not. Majority of white folks benefit off the penitentiary, whether they're probation officers, whether they're COs, whether they're lawyers, whether they're judges, whether they're anything involved in that arena. So they have a natural subconscious desire to benefit from it. Not consciously, but this is my job. I want to do a good job. I want to represent blase. On our end, we have that same necessity. So when we talk about corrections is locking up more black folks than white folks, that boils down to policies. So what are we getting locked up for, and why aren't we changing these policies? The same when we talk about associated benefit factor, and I'll give you another hard example just to show people facts. A few years ago, I was blessed to be able to help close down Crossroads Correctional Facilities. So Crossroads Correctional Facilities, DeKalb County, had a 26% increase in revenues from the people that they had in the penitentiary. Now, the average person in this penitentiary is going back to the east side of Kansas City, east side of St. Louis, that's depopulated, doesn't have jobs or incentives for these individuals to come back in. But DeKalb benefits off of these inmates being in there because every 10 years you have what? You have your census, which goes off the population density, not necessarily the people that's using the infrastructure, driving down the streets, going to schools, et cetera, whoop-de-whoop. Now, let me bring it back to the criminal justice arena. We often talk about police brutality. We often talk about law enforcement. That's the last caveat of the criminal justice arena. They're there to enforce laws. The first caveat is the people that's in the General Assemblies, whether that's federal or state, because they're the ones that write the laws, that creates the policies, that creates the people that's getting locked up. So when we look at drug laws, when we look at arrest records, when we look at low-level crimes and the times that's associated with that, we're allowing people to benefit off of us, and then we suffer by not getting involved. Because we say, politics is outside of us.
Yeah, so now, but like you said, we have to get rid of those policies. So, I always preach about people voting on the local level and just kind of pay attention and voting on local level. How do we get rid of those policies? Like, if we know that there's a policy that's in place that's hurting us, that's hurting us in the community, what do we do and what steps do we take to get rid of those type of policies or those?
A couple ways. Now to do it in reverse engineering, because I've been talking from the standpoint of somebody that actually understands, right? So if you're in a position where you don't understand how the water gets in the bottle, I need to first figure out how water gets in the bottle, right? Then I need to figure out who's the person that actually puts the water in the bottle, which brings us to our local elected officials and what they're doing and what they're not. So if you look like me, but I never see you, we can't share similar circumstances because I never see you. If you look like me and I see you, we probably share similar circumstances because we're in the same environment, proximity, right? So when we have elected officials that you don't see, problem number one. When you have elected officials that don't live like you live or live like you live, that's problem number two. Right? So identity politics, in my opinion, needs to be thrown out, and it needs to be policy-orientated politics. The same when we talk about anything. So how do we start deconstructing laws that are not beneficial to us? First, we have to understand that law. No ifs, ands, or buts. I talk a lot about drug laws because I study drug laws. And when you look at drug laws, you'll see there is no balance between, I just use crack and cocaine. Physically, crack cocaine has the same physical dependency on the body. It depletes the dopamine the exact same amount. The difference is the amount of high, right? Cocaine, you say high for 2 hours, crack, you high for 15 to 30 minutes, right? But the time frame is different. Why? Right? So if there is no scientific basis for a different factor, then we have to start drawing the line in the sand of what we want and what we don't, and not asking people for it, demanding it. Meaning, if I have somebody that's not articulating my standpoint, you can't represent me. I can't articulate it myself. I need to find somebody that looks like me or that comes from the same circumstances as me, and once they start articulating what I can articulate, then I forcefully support that. That creates community, that creates culture, that creates independent policies. So you have a lot of people that compare the so-called minority communities and the LGBTQ communities' advancements underneath the law. They be like, well, they get more than so-called blacks get underneath the law. Yes, because it's a more dedicated, organizing effort to only these issues.
Right.
Nothing else.
Right.
Only these issues. So if the issues is drug laws, I don't care who you are, what are you saying on these drug laws? Same when we talk about partisan politics. I don't care what color you represent, bro. What are you talking when it comes to housing policy? When we talk about local stuff, what is it? And I talked about banking, and I said it's an excuse. Well, we allow our local politicians to bank with entities that we know ran line certain areas. That means that those people in the poor, impoverished areas aren't electing people that are confident and competent enough to say that we're not going to support that deal because, see, this bank has a history of not investing in 64130, 64127, 64128. And now when we have more people like that, my job becomes a lot easier and I'm no longer looked at as the bad guy.
Right. So that's good. That's good stuff, man. What did you call that? Identity
politics.
Identity politics. Identity politics.
Yeah.
I'm gonna look into that some more. I like that. No, go ahead.
No, it's just when you look at somebody and you say that just because they look like me, they like me.
Right.
No, Malcolm said it better than anybody. You had two sets. You had one that was in the field, one that was in the house.
Right.
They both looked alike. They had different motivations. Right. So identity politics is the worst thing you can do. Culturalistic politics, in my opinion, is the best because you're supporting people that support the same things that you like. If you want your kids to have a top education, you don't support people that don't want your kids to have a top education. I'll give you another hard example. 1 year at the state, I was sitting in caucus, and I had a bill that would deconstruct public education. It would create independent schools inside the geographical zones, meaning black folks, brown folks, white folks, y'all can create whatever type of school that y'all want as long as y'all meeting the basic curriculum, right? A whole bunch of pushback from this. Republicans like the idea because it's similar to charter schools. Democrats did not like the idea. I stood up in caucus and I was like, how many members in here kids go to public schools? I was the only one that had my hand up. And I knew that when I asked the question. So I wasn't fighting against something that I wasn't suffering through. I was fighting against something that I knew was fundamentally flawed for people that come from my culture, not ethnicity.
Like I said, before I met you, man, I always felt like, I've always felt that leadership is very important. But when I've always felt some kind of way about politics when it came down to leadership, because I felt like when you talk about leadership within politics, I felt like politicians always had to sacrifice some form of ethics to get that extra vote or that extra attention that you have to sacrifice something, your ethics or your morals or whatever. But when I look at leadership today, I'm almost curious, is ethics or morals even a part of politics now?
Yes, and I'm going to answer it in a different way. The first part is 100% right. I think in positions of institutional leadership, there has to be a personal sacrifice, right? Now, depending on one person's understanding of selling out and buying in creates the variation. So with me, I sacrifice a little bit. I sacrifice what the rawness that I would like to display. I sacrifice some of the natural instincts and reactions that I would like to display. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. And I do that because I respect the seat, but I would refuse to compromise my culturalistic beliefs, right? But I have to walk that line because sometimes my reaction is muted because I understand that I represent more than people that grew up in impoverished communities. I represent more than people that look like me. I understand this. So I curtail some of my natural reactions. But I never compromise the beliefs. But that's not across the board. But across the board, yes, you do have people that compromise, and your question about ethics and morals, in my opinion, will go to the culture and environment one's in. So when I was at the Capitol, the culture and environment was wholeheartedly different than the culture and environment down here at City Hall. The culture and environment at the Capitol was more ideologue when it comes to issues and the way that we looked at other governance. Local, it would be more personalized, which in my opinion has a tendency to make things extremely more messy. Not saying the state was pure, perfect, or nothing like that, but at least when you have ideologies that people are fighting for, is less concerned about, well, that's my cousin's cousin's cousin. I don't care if it's your cousin's cousin. He's not a good employee.
Right.
Doesn't matter. But yeah.
And and see that's another thing, man, that I admire about you is it's because you have the personality to where, even though you're running for a position, you can still appease to both sides. Because see, like I said, I feel like, when you're running for that position of leadership, such as a position, in politics, you're not just running for people that look like you, but see, you still can communicate and gain the trust of people that don't even look like you. Because I remember us having a conversation and you were talking about the places that you were going out to, trying to gain the votes of people in other areas of the community. And I think that's very important, man. And I love it that you do that. Why do you think that some people, I guess, find it challenging to do that? Is it because they have a lack of ability to communicate across cultural lines, or why do you think that is?
No, you just hit it. Culture, and I'm going to keep saying this, culture and ethnicity, two different things. It's not understanding the culture in which they're from, or not wanting to be from that culture, wanting to assimilate into a different culture. So when I first got elected, I very vividly remember one of the first conversations I had from a newspaper. They called me and they was like, how are you going to represent both communities? You have Independence, you have Kansas City. And I was like, well, the white folks in Independence, they suffering from bad housing, they have issues with police, their schools is messed up. It's, it's like my neighborhood. We come from the same culture. Threw them off, right? Not same ethnicity. So when I look across the board, I try to represent culturalistically. Now I'm black, no ifs, ands about it. I'm a descendant of Africans. I'm a descendant of natives. Biologically, no, nothing you can't find on that. I have paperwork on that, right? But my culture is a culture that comes from poverty. My mother wasn't poor. She had her own business, but everything around me was poor. Violence. I grew up in the 50s. Blood block. I wore all blue. Drug dealing, that was normalized, that was enticed and attractive. Street life, most of not just me, but most of my environment, talking about older males and even some of the women that I grew up around, and these weren't bad people. This is my culture. So when you come from a culture of people that work, people that suffer, people that have to figure out and be innovative of how they survive, you look at life different. When you come from a culture of security, you don't necessarily understand why somebody would run up in the gas station for $50. He's not doing that because he's morally deprived. He's doing that because he has 3 kids at the house and he ain't got no way to feed them. He ain't got no job around him. That goes back to the institutions, the penitentiaries, and the rent line. But you understand and you look at stuff different. And I think the best type of elected officials, in my opinion, are the type of elected officials that come from the real world,
I
that
agree.
understand they're from the real world, and that is comfortable being in that real world. But in the body politics, that's not what we go for. We more often than not go for the picket fence, the dog, and the wife, because that is what is sold to us. But again, begging the people to pay attention. If you don't have a picket fence, a dog, and a perfect family, you shouldn't elect somebody that has that, because they're not going to understand you. You should elect that person that wasn't able to pay their bills.
You hit the nail on the head, though, because I've always said that same thing. I said, how do you vote for somebody who can't even associate with what you are going through, what you're dealing with?
Yeah, you can't.
I never could see them representing me the way I really need to be represented.
And you'd be stupid for thinking so. And this is my problem overtly with so-called minorities in America. We look at political parties as saviors, And then we wonder why we get nothing. We get nothing because we're not leveraging. I use Ice Cube as an example. Ice Cube went from being the top dog. That's Cube. NAA. You know what I'm saying? Boys in the Hood. The whole nine.
Right.
The family movies. Loved by everybody. He's Uncle Tom now. In a day? Really? In 24 hours? And what did he say? I want to leverage both parties. That's bad. How? Where's that bad in any other reality? When we talk about inner city stuff, we do that all day long. But when we talk about politics, it's going outside of the norm. And going outside of the norm is what? It's unacceptable.
Right.
So if going outside of the norm is unacceptable, then that means we're normalizing being secondary citizens. We're normalizing the correction numbers. We're normalizing the lack of housing. We're normalizing the lack of ownership when it comes to employment and jobs and all of this good stuff. Because if we wasn't, we wouldn't be supporting something that doesn't support us.
Right.
Because that's just not smart.
You know, let me say this, man. I'm gonna go out on the limb on this one. Some people might feel a little upset, but just since you mentioned Ice Cube, you know, because that ignited just a firestorm, you know, of stuff. But let me ask you this. Let me ask your opinion on this. Do you think, in your opinion, with the Trump presidency, do you think Trump would be almost referred to as like the white supremacist president, and the Biden presidency being more so like the black woman's president?
Man, let me go ahead and throw this out here and start it off. You had two white men in the room. One white man said I'm the least racist in the room. The other one said nothing. Right? So when we talk about policies, I'm going to go to the whole thing with Q. Democrats said they would talk to him after they got in the White House. Republicans said they would try to appease you right now. We're not going to give you anything, but we'll try to appease you right now. I don't see it as a net gain for anyone because there was nothing on the table. Politics simply is about who gets what. It's about regulations. It's not about anything else. What did we get out of this election? What policies was they talking about during this election? None. What reforms was they talking about during this election? None. What guarantees did we get during this election? None. They've been protesting all summer. Was that even brought up? No.
Right.
It was not. Right? So when we talk about who benefits off of this, the institution benefits off of this. Neither one of them was non-institutional players. As renegade as the media tries to make Trump out to be, he fell in line with 99% of Republican policies. And it would be the same when we talk about the liberals with Biden. As liberal as people want to be, Biden has never been liberal on policies. Never. Even when he ran, he didn't agree to the liberalization of policies. You're going to be part of the Green New Deal? I got my own deal. So at the end of the day, until black folks, and I'm not talking about everybody that falls up in the disparity, but I'm talking about those that are culturalistically competent and understand or wants to buy into that lane, until they start controlling their own policies, and then leveraging that off of who we're going to allow to sit in the seat that dictates policy, we get nothing. And that presidential election was irritating to me all the way around because I watched a whole bunch of people trout something because, you know, we don't like this dude, which is cool, but what's he going to bring to the table? And again, you had two people in the room, and one said I'm the least racist, and the other one just said, oh, man, here you go.
Okay.
So,
and I say that because, like I said, with the Ice Cube situation, which I thought was it was jaw dropping for me.
It's
embarrassing. And I'm thinking, you know, okay, here comes a black man. Now, see, this is the thing. This is what I've noticed, man. Let me kind of go back. I've kind of noticed whenever we always get this as black men, we always get this. We always get pressured on speaking up, stepping up to the plate. You know, and when we do step up to the plate, you know, when we do try and have a voice, you know, it almost seems like we get chopped down for it, and that's what I saw big time with Ice Cube, and I thought it was very sad. You know, I think a lot of it came from people who hadn't even read what it was he was trying to do, which I think it was more painful to see the way black women treated him. Yeah. And when I asked you, when I mentioned, you know, with Biden being the black woman's president, is with him having Harris as his running mate, you see that right there brought a storm of our women who came.
Which again is not only embarrassing, it's disrespectful. So
it is.
I've been in office for about 10 years. So during the presidential debates, you had Harris call him a racist.
You're right.
On stage.
You're right.
Then a couple months later, I co-sign and I bring you in. Well, what is this for? Is it because I respect you as a senator? Right. Well, I couldn't have respected you as a senator because I just sat in here and talked about you like you was a dog. Or is it because of identity politics? And identity politics, again, is the worst type of politics.
Right.
Cultural politics is different. Now, had she came in, it was like, you know, I'm from the block and this is what I survived, I can rock with you. But you wasn't. You came with prosecutorial laws that was harmful. Now, let's talk about the institution. Just because I'm going to keep it funky. There's a lady here in the state of Missouri named Kim Gardner. She's the circuit attorney of the city of St. Louis. Her whole tenure has been going against the system. Her whole tenure. They talk about her, they call her names, they get all type of negative press, but her whole tenure, and the reason I'm saying this is because, again, it goes back to culturalistic politics.
Right.
Since she's been in the city of St. Louis, she's changed drug laws, what people are going to be arrested for. She created a list of officers that had discipline issues that they would no longer take cases from, all type of institutional criminal justice reforms. When I look across the board over here, I don't see that. I see institutional support. I see more black folks locked up. Well, you know, we can say it was the sentiment at the time. But that doesn't work for me because the sentiment of the time during the slave days is that you wasn't supposed to help people out. But yet Harriet Tubman ran people down the railroad, the Underground Railroad. But that wasn't the sentiment.
Right.
So I can't say that just because the sentiment of the time was this is where we're going to be tough on crime and I got to support this. Well, why wouldn't we say the same thing when we support the freedom fighters?
Right.
So, and I said all that to say this. Personally, during the presidential election, I was disengaged. I've actually had the Biden campaign reach out to me. I turned them down. I had the Sanders campaign reach out to me, and I asked them to do certain things. He ended up getting out before we came to a full agreement. Last cycle, I had Hillary's people reach out to me. I shut them down. I consistently shut folks down because you're not going to utilize me to get inside of my community when I know you care nothing about policies that affect people in my community.
Right.
And unfortunately, we don't have that across the board.
Yeah, I agree.
But that goes back to culturalistic politics and why we shouldn't elect people just because of what they look like. I'm going to keep getting that in.
I like that, man. But so, I mean, but just moving forward, right? In your opinion, what should we do as a culture when we talk about voting for someone that's gonna do something for us? Now, when I say do something for us, I don't want to put us in a position where we're constantly looking for someone to do something for us and us not do anything, but someone that's going to assist us in moving forward with our agendas and things like that within our own community. What should we do? Should we continue to vote Democrat, Republican, or should we look for another party or try to establish just another party?
We should sit at home first and figure out what our priorities are. And I think that's the biggest problem because, like you said, either somebody's giving us something or we asking somebody to come up with something to help us with something.
Right.
Madness. As opposed to us figuring out what we want and then organizing with that. And I'm going to leave it on basic stuff just to show an example. Schools, the majority of kids are homeschooled right now because of the pandemic.
Right.
The majority of black folks here in America say they don't teach us our own curriculum. They don't teach us our own history. They don't teach us anything that makes us beneficial. Well, there's a choice. Either I take and I start doing this myself, and how do we do it ourselves? It takes 10 people in the state of Missouri to be able to start a school. Right? It's 4 of us in here right now. We'll need 6 more, and we can start our own little homeschool, and we can start going after resources that the government already has for education, for school. The same we talk about community policing in general, right? So neighborhoods, if I don't own a land on this neighborhood, then I don't control anything. If I own the parcels and the houses on this neighborhood, I can create my own privatized security. And I can say we don't want whoever to come through, or we want these people to come through.
Right.
So I would say the first thing that we need to do, and this is not something new, Malcolm actually said it before he died. Right? So when they was asking about the civil rights and human rights, he was like, why are we fighting for civil rights when there's already human rights on the table? And it would be the same when it comes to political identity. The only negative about the Republican and Democratic Party is that they don't make alleviations for so-called black folks. And the only reason they don't make alleviations for so-called black folks is because they don't have to. And they don't have to because we don't come to the table demanding what we want, and you get nothing else.
Right.
Like, you don't get our support if we don't get this.
Right.
We don't even have a conversation. Everybody else does that. And until we get to that point, and I don't think we can get to that point until we self-identify what we want.
And see, that's the challenging
But is it,
part. And I say that because when you go into our communities, and you'll find like the Chinese. They have the Chinese restaurants. They have the hair shops. They got that. Then you have your Middle Easterners and East Indians got the gas stations. They got that. So they got that. Then when you look at us, when you go into our community, what do we have? Because it used to be, I'm gonna tell you, when I was younger, it used to be black women that had all the nail shops, the sculpture nails and everything. You go and you see a host of black women was doing that thing. But then I don't know where that dynamic actually switched, but then you start seeing this. But it's like when you look at like I said, your Asians, your East Indians, your Middle Easterners, you rarely hear them crying out, this is what we want, this is what we want you to do for us as far as like politics, but they're out doing this stuff themselves. It's like, why don't we have an institution that we kind of control this?
In my opinion, culture isn't important to us yet. When culture becomes important to us, then all of those institutions become a necessity that we own. Right. So when we talk about the nail shop, you got women that go to the nail shop, they buy nails and they buy hair, but they're not employed. They're not employing us. I used to work at Glamorama. I could tell you for a fact they wasn't employing us then, right? So
you was at Glamorama?
Yeah, I was at Glamorama.
We'll talk about that later.
Yeah,
we're gonna talk about that.
You know what I'm saying? I know all of them, man. Give me a number 4. But we know they don't employ us when we go in there. But we choose to give them our money. Right. We don't have to give them our money for our nails and our hair because our hair grows naturally. Right. But culturalistically, afro or unpermed hair isn't attractive. It's attractive to me, but culturalistically it's not, right? The same when it talks about nails. Culturalistically, it's not attractive for me to grow my own nails. I have to put on some long nails that don't reflect nothing. All right, whatever. The same when we talk about gold or platinum and diamonds. The majority of diamonds come from Africa. We know this. We also know they're blood diamonds because they're still putting these folks in slavery. But that's not important to us because diamonds are being sold to us that shows richness, which has nothing to do with richness because if we study the substance, we understand that they're more available than they are non-available, which means they're not as valuable. Right. The same when we talk about housing or whatever it is. Culture, in my opinion, has to become important. And when culture becomes important and you see that little kid that looks like you, it's important that kid has opportunity. The same when we talk about housing. The average person, when they get a little bit of money, culturalistically, they want to move someplace different. Right? Culturalistically. I want to be in Briarwood or wherever it is. Well, that means you don't respect your culture. If you don't respect your culture, it can't grow up. The same when we talk about gas stations. The gas station and the rim shop is the same. You don't pay for the gas. It's a front. Right. They donate the gas. Right? Amoco gives you the gas. Conoco gives you the gas. Quick Trip gives you the gas. Valero gives you the gas. You make your money off of what? The cookies, the Zams, and the Wham-Whams, right? The pops and the juice and all of that good stuff. Right. So again, in my opinion, it takes us being serious. And I just use myself as an example. I don't have cable. I don't watch a lot of stuff on TV because we don't own our own media. I don't go to a lot of venues because culturalistically they're not what I want. I don't want to adhere to your dress code. I don't want to adhere to the way you want me to come in. It's cool. I want to go to my own club. The problem with that is that we have to, again, in my opinion, put culture first. And once you start putting culture first, then it becomes important that you invest in people that are around you. Because it's not identity, culture.
But okay. Let me
Maybe
see.
I need to go in more details.
Okay, no. I think you on point. I think you're right on point. But would you say that even goes back sometimes to even laws? Like, for example, when you go back to, let's say the black tax, how black people are just taxed. You know, let's say you have a community of people that want to grow their community, but, you know, you have a community that's, you know, they're constantly being overtaxed. They high interest rates, rent, poor living conditions, constantly getting pulled over and ticketed. Got to take off work to go to court. Got fined. So it's hard. I mean, don't you see that being challenging to a community that wants to thrive, but we can't thrive because we live under a system that's constantly taxing us, fining us, fees and rates?
Yes, but again, system, institutions. System doesn't exist without institutions, right? Institutions are policies and people. So when we talk about institutions, we're talking about the ability to control everything in front of us, or not. So if we talk about taxation, taxation is a governmental contract from the community to government.
Right.
I can use the city as a perfect example. East side of Kansas City does not receive this type of tax dollars that the rest of the districts do. No ifs, ands, or buts. But why? Couple reasons. So let me look at our specialized tax incentive policies from TIFs to CIDs, etc. West side, you see CIDs utilized to reinvest in these buildings, to rehab these buildings, to populate these buildings. I vote no on the majority of these CIDs because they're single owner occupant CIDs.
Okay.
They're a misuse of the way the law is supposed to be written. The same with TIFs.
Okay.
TIFs are supposed to be meant to be utilized in impoverished communities to build those up, but they're used outside of the area. Why though? The half of the council since the 60s has been black. So that means that we're allowing this to go out because we're allowing people to sit in there that looks like me but don't represent my culture, because if you represented my culture, you'll be fighting to make sure these resources went to the poor areas. Now, tax laws. Tax laws is typically done at the state and the federal level. Took me a minute, I didn't understand taxation until I sat on Ways and Means.
Right.
Sitting in taxation, I started understanding a whole bunch of stuff like, oh, the tax laws is actually beneficial to anybody that owns anything. It's not beneficial to us because we don't own stuff, which means we need to start owning stuff. Like no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Okay. So when we talk about the over-incentivized areas, they typically do that in low-income areas because we know these folks aren't paying attention. So I can go ahead and pass a 2% tax increases going over here because you're not here. And the person that's you sent there doesn't actually represent your culture because you didn't pay attention to who he was. He looked like you, but he didn't talk like you. He looked like you, he didn't live like you. So yes, I think policies or impediment, that's why I've always worked to try to deconstruct policies. You look at what's on the board, like, all right, this is not beneficial to me. So I'm gonna get rid of this. America was created on robbing, pillaging, and stealing. And then all of those quickly became illegal, right? Why? Because it was no longer beneficial. And it would be the same when we talk about laws and resources and things that are non-existent in our community. You cannot have policies that are dictated off of taxation that's not being allocated right unless you got people that's sitting there that don't represent you. Like, so we can say we can redo all the tax codes, but there really is no need to. The same when we talk about tax incentives. I vote no consciously, but I don't want to change the language because the language makes it applicable to damn near anything. Our problem is we're not coming with plans. So what I've been doing is reaching out to developers, et cetera, trying to come up with some development plans so we can actually have development going. But you have to have people that are culturally competent. We have a couple of deals that's coming through the east side that I don't think is good deals. But you got all these people like, hey, they're gonna give us something. But we're giving them money to give us something. So if I'm giving you money to give me something, you're gonna give me what I want, not what you tell me I should have.
Right.
But that's a mental issue. And again, I keep talking about culture because I want folks to understand that culturalistically, if we start organizing amongst ourselves, and I'm not talking about everybody that has melanin in their skin. I'm talking about everybody that has the same understanding that I have.
Right.
Let's get together and we start building here. Right? Because that's what community is.
Right.
And then you start controlling policy. But I think, again, our biggest issue is not controlling policy because of identity politics and not taking the time to be honest with what we want.
Right.
Because the minute we become honest with what we want, nothing else matters.
But how do you connect to those? How do you connect to people who just aren't aware of that, though?
Yeah.
See what I'm saying? Because, like I said, before 2019, man, I was probably that cat, man. I was like,
Observation and participation is what I try to do. Frederick Douglass, I'm going to mess this quote up, but Frederick Douglass said something that I didn't agree with when I was younger, and then I got older and I was he was actually right. When he was like, it's easier to build strong young boys to strong men than it is to repair broken men.
Right.
Probably missaid that. But that's what I try to do. It's observation. So it's no longer a desire of mine to try to get everybody to get everybody. Because I know people have other realities going on.
Right.
It's now a necessity to organize with those that have a similar understanding. And that creates a long-term embedded community. And I just use housing and businesses as an example. We can't preach to people that you need to start your own business and this is what it is. But once you start starting your own businesses, people start seeing it. So what we did on Chestnut is we brought 3 houses over there. One house we're turning into a reading center. You got to come over there, see all the rehabs, knock that wall out and all that good stuff. The other house we're turning into a domestic violence shelter. And then we have a community garden over there and a tree house and all of this good stuff. What it has done on that block is you see neighbors cleaning their yard. When we do cleanups, we help them out. Right. You see more pride in that neighborhood because people feel like somebody cares and now they care about themselves. Right. And you're going to see that balloon out. And I believe this is how we get ourselves out of this situation. We got to stop talking about it and actually start showing people. I actually plan on starting school here shortly. Okay. But we got to stop talking about it and showing like, dude, it's not an unattainable equation. If I can go to work for $10 an hour, I can sell something for $10 an hour. Right? Yeah. If I can send my kids at home on the Zoom computer and they can listen to their teachers tell them something all day long, I can get with 10 people and create a curriculum. Right. That creates a school. Right. I'm feeling that. And the same with businesses. We have to stop supporting things that show no support. That's just madness. We go to stores that don't hire us. That's your fault. Like, I suffer a lot because I refuse to spend money certain places. But I'm cool with it because I got the money that I didn't spend at the place that didn't want me. Right. And I have no problem with that. I walk out of restaurants religiously and don't even care. I'm not embarrassed. You keep the bread, bro. Right. I don't keep what's in my pocket. You should have came out quicker. But until we're serious with ourselves, same with my kids, bro. My kids are smarter than the stuff that they get in school. And they only there because I wanted them to socialize. Right. But that's it. I hold no value in the education that they get from there because I know it's not meant for advancement. But that's just studying the educational paradigm, which means that we have a choice. Right. Either we keep going to something that we know is flawed, and then we blame those for giving us something flawed. How many times you gonna drink out of a dirty cup of water, bro? Like,
I gotta agree with you on that one though, man. Because I constantly preach that to people. It's like, it's for example. Like I made the example once. I said, if it's like, for example, when you watch when a child go from junior high school or 7th, 8th grade into high school, the first thing, especially when I say a child or a teenager, the ones that look like us, the first thing they want you to do, they want you to visit the basketball coach or the football coach. You ain't talking to you about, or starting a business or anything like that. They looking at you. They already recruiting you for sports.
Yes.
If you tall, they want you to visit the basketball coach. If you stocky, they want you to visit the football coach.
Yes. Yes. To make us.
You see it all the time.
Yes. And then we fall for it.
So you find a lot of parents. That's their hope.
Yes.
Their hope is not set in their child starting a business. Their hope is set in them becoming an NFL star, or NBA star.
Yes, which goes back to the statement that you made earlier when you talked about Ice Cube getting out of line, pretty much, I'm paraphrasing, getting out of line. In society, we're given our placement, and we typically follow that. And what I'm saying is that we need to create our own placement. Stop following the placement that they're giving us. When I grew up, I literally followed a lot of the placement. Well, I'm in the 50s. I'm supposed to walk like this. Now, I grew up in the blood block, but I like blue. But I had a whole bunch of blood friends, so I still followed it. I just wore blue. I don't know.
Right.
But my friends is bloods, so I can't be a Crip because they bloods. And I never was jumped in the gang because you're not going to jump me. So that didn't happen. How was I actually a Crip? I wasn't. I just liked to wear blue. And they wasn't really bloods because they wasn't jumped in either. A couple of them may have been, but they just like wearing red. And we grew up in the same block. Right? But this is something that was given to us. The same with hustle. And I used to make this example all the time in trap houses. Like, we make excuses. They give it to us. All right, well, if they give it to us and we taking it, then that means we're their agent, right? Well, no, it's no way around it. All right, well, I'm in here with you, bro, so I'm not looking down at you. But I'm just saying, if they give it to us, and we say they gave it to us to destroy us, and we use it to destroy us, can I actually blame them? That's like me putting the pistol on the table talking about you shoot yourself, and he get mad at me. Nah, I asked you to shoot yourself. And you knew that I put the gun on the table for you to shoot yourself. You can't be mad at me. Now, if you use that gun against me, that's conscious. You thinking that.
Right.
He's using this to destroy me. I'm going to take this, and I'm going to use this for my benefit. And it should be the same understanding in the whole dogma of America, whether that's politics, whether that's finances, what have you. If you were given something to destroy you and you understand that, you utilize that in a different formation. So if we're saying that banks ain't giving us money, why are we still supporting these institutions?
Right.
If we say that Johnson & Johnson was founded in slavery, why the hell are we still buying baby oil? I mean, all this is stuff you can research. And
you correct. you correct.
Right.
But let's let's kind of scale back a little bit. Crime in Kansas City. I mean, this is something I was hoping that at some point we get the mayor in one of these chairs here, because, like I said, I moved here to Kansas City in '92, and I've been hearing the same question about crime in Kansas City. And I think maybe the last 4 years I've probably been really concerned about it. And when I say concerned about it, living in the inner city and watching crime go up and down, every year. What? And I'm gonna tell you what bug.
I'm sorry.
Right. I mean, some years it's kind of down, crime is down, and next thing you know, it's back up. Like somebody listened to say, "What? Crime is down? Let me go out and commit some." You know what I'm saying? But I guess where I'm concerned is that, because see, each mayor that we've had, the question has always been the same. What's going on in our city? What's going on? Why this? But is anyone actually looking at the cause of crime? Are we looking at like mental illness? Are we looking at depression? Are we looking at those things? Are we looking at conditions that cause people to suffer from depression? Are we even looking at that?
Hey man, I'm gonna hit you with this 2 ways. First, I'm gonna do a shameless plug for what I'm trying to do. So I have an Office of Community Engagement that I'm trying to get passed, right? And what the Office of Community Engagement would do would streamline all DOJ dollars, Department of Justice dollars that we get with crime prevention, etc., put it in a streamlined fashion, and then create contracts or services with evidence-based programs. So if you say you can do 15 and this curriculum, cool. If you say you got drug resources and this is the curriculum, cool. That would actually go after the root causes. That would actually allow entities and community self-determination when it comes to fixing the problem. Now, to go to the answer to the question that you just presented, there is no desire because, again, we're talking about institutions. So if I spill this water on the table, I got a choice. I can use a napkin, which would cause me to use another napkin, right? Because the napkin soaks up the water, it doesn't actually get rid of the water.
Right.
But that creates a institutional jobs. Right? Or I can, get rid of the whole napkin, the whole covering, don't have to worry about the water. Or dry it up or what have you. So when we talk about crime and the root issues, there's very slow desire to actually fix that. And I think parts of that boils down to competent understanding and then one's life walk. So with me, growing up in the inner city, watching people do things that were illegal for good reasons, right? And then getting into the professional arena and watching people do bad things for wrong reasons, right? The breakdown of morality and understanding of criminal justice fixes is real to me. So when I talk about the root causes, I understand that the dude that ran up in the grocery store really isn't a moralistically bad person. Now the dude that, had a professional job that stole that money because he could, and he did it just because he could, he's a really bad person. I said all that to get down to the 70% allocations that we do for public safety. Well, we know that police officers cannot stop crime until crime happens, right? So we know that increasing public safety dollars, by definition, cannot reduce crime. It can only cause crime to increase because there has to be justifications for the employees, for the resources, and all of this good stuff. If we actually wanted crime to recede, we would take from these institutions and deconstruct them and create opportunities inside of communities that are lacking. So we know the average person that gets locked up in the state of Missouri gets locked up for a drug offense. So we're talking, I'm gonna be a little off on these numbers, but we're talking about 70-something% of minorities, black and brown, locked up for low-level drug offenses, 3 to 5 years average sentencing before the criminal justice code change that we did a couple years ago. We know that the average murderer in the state of Missouri doesn't do 10 years, right?
Right.
Average one doesn't do 10. So why are our policies like this? Because of who benefits, which brings us back to culturalistic politics. The inner cities are violent by design, but that goes back to culture. Because the minute we start buying into those that look like me, that surround me, live in the same culture, and we have to be linked, then certain things become unacceptable. It becomes unacceptable for the dude that drives down the street shooting, that just drives down the street shooting, to exist over here. Now, Tim, who side hustles, but is actually cool on the block, he's copacetic.
Right.
Because he just needs some more employment, but he watches out for the block, he watches out for these kids. But that comes to culturalistic understanding, not legal definitions of morality. So again, I don't think crime is going to be reduced until we become culturally competent. And that's what we're trying to work on with the No More Excuses Coalition. So with the No More Excuses Coalition, I don't try to absolve anybody's entity, don't try to absolve anybody's mentality. What we try to do is find like-minded individuals and we rock. And I'll give you some examples. So I have some young cats, Melanated Investments. They do investing, real estate, investing, financial classes, seminars, all this good stuff. When we link, Your business is to get people in houses and to teach them finances.
Right.
As an elected official, I need conscious constituents so I can get stuff done. So I need people to actually own houses. You can get them in houses with credit problems. Cool. You got houses? Even better. You do financial classes for free. Even better. There's another individual that was coming through. He has a security program. I'm looking at his program like this is a platform that doesn't benefit me, but would benefit the entire community by having 24-hour rapid response. Another individual, I'm going to get the comedians people. So we have some comedians that we're putting together some shows, and I'm rocking with Eddie Griffin. We're going to be doing some things starting in,
That's cool.
Yeah, not starting in January, but it's a twofold thing. One, we know comedy reflects reality, and we also know that we can talk to people in a different venue. And it also has an element of reducing violence and crime.
Right.
There's another individual that's doing gaming against violence. Totally different technique, but I'm saying all of this to say none of these are things that I came to the table and created. I didn't say this is what you do, this is what you do, this is what you do. I just found people that was doing things that I understood. And they wasn't doing it because of me, but from the culture that they come from. And we happen to come from similar cultures, which makes a universal culture. So it makes sense to do certain things. He's not actually part of the coalition, but he's doing smoke your tires. Average person be like, man, that's a bad thing. Well, no, he has a whole bunch of people that come from a culture over here that he's bringing into a positive venue here, and they're not bothering him. Right? And it's certain ways of growing that and creating our own economy and our own business. So I said all of that to go back to culture, man. To me, our biggest issue in America is not having an identified culture, not a singular, but identified culture. And once we have an identified culture, it makes it very easy to organize with people that surround you. You mentioned sports. You don't go play basketball with people that like hockey. You find people like basketball. Like, I mean, you like to shoot? All right, cool. Come on over here. Let's credit the team. And it should be the same when we talk about advancements. So if you find yourself in a so-called marginalized culture, my opinion is it's a necessity for those that are in that marginalized culture to find people that are marginalized just like them and then to start working on what they want. Nothing else. I don't really care what y'all want over there. We want to move this bottle. We got enough people to pick this bottle up. And now I can bring it back to local stuff. You got 15 people. It takes 10 people to start a school. All right, we got a school. You got 15 people. 5 of them work. 3 of them, 7 of them work, 7 of them don't work. Where you got finances coming in and you got sweat equity. I mean, if we look at it that way. Or we like, man, they ain't got no job. Nah, bro, they can actually be the sweat equity while I'm bringing in the money. Because I can't do both. But again, that takes being honest with the culture and being honest with what we want.
You know, I look, man, again, I totally agree with you. But, you know, I've owned a couple of businesses here. And I guess, and I'm going to tell you the thing. But look, I'm going to tell you this, man. I'm going to tell you the most challenging thing about being a businessman in Kansas City is that we still have this, this stigmatism about supporting each other. And so I guess I'm curious as is to, I guess, 2 things. Number one, are there funds, like, for example, in Kansas City for black people to start business? So it's funds that we can actually get. You know, that's not going to be funded somewhere else or given to another institution. And I guess 2, are we able to get access to like the venues or because it's almost like when you have, you know, people in our community that are, like I said, trying to thrive, we tend to run into these hoops and hurdles and smoke screens and things like that, which sometimes discourages people. And, you know, and I guess I want to know is there access available, and what can we do, or what should we start doing so that we can build this, I guess, this comfort with doing business with each other, so we can do business together and hire each other?
Yeah, access is not where it should be at. And again, that goes back to the people that sits there and that don't. And I just use Kansas City as an example. So we did the covert CARES Act dollars. If you look at and I don't have the figures in front of me, but if you look at the covert CARES Act dollars and how they was dispersed, you will see the so-called minority, not wholeheartedly wrong on these numbers, but you'll see so-called minority businesses was all the way at the bottom. I don't want to give numbers, all the way at the bottom. You'll see non-so-called minority businesses was getting dollars.
Now,
all throughout,
I don't mean to stop you. We said minority now.
So-called.
We know.
I said so-called.
Okay, gotcha. All right, go ahead.
Yeah, not so-called. And I say so-called because anybody with melanin in their skin actually creates a majority, but now we're talking about governmental word games, so so-called minority. And I'm talking about those that are melanated. So when you look at so-called minority businesses, they did not access the cash that they should have accessed. No ifs, ands, or buts. Some of those is requirements as far as how much capital you're supposed to have and some other stuff. But at the end of the day, it boils down to who sits in that seat. Right? Because we have a decision to say yes or to say no. And more often than not, we allow people that look like us to say yes, and that means they're not like you because you couldn't. And I'm trying to say that in the nicest way that I can.
Right.
So you have buckets of dollars, right? Government doesn't create any money itself, it's all taxation dollars. So these buckets of dollars are only allocated by those that sit in these seats. And those that sit in these seats are elected by those that they're supposed to represent. When it comes, more often than not, when it comes to the so-called minority community, it's not those that we position to represent us. It's those that have been placed there to represent us, which is a totally different methodology of who's representing who, right? We're not sending the cat from the street to represent me because I'm in the streets and I say politics ain't about nothing. But when I get arrested, I go to jail and I do the time that the politician gave me. Or we're not electing a single mother that has 4 kids to Congress because she's a single mother, she has 4 kids, and she has bad debt. But when my baby daddy leaves and I'm on my 5th kid, I have nobody that represents me that understands. But I have a woman that looks like me that came from wealth that doesn't understand my circumstances. And I keep saying this because politics is actually simple. When you have people that believe what you believe, you get what you get. The biggest issue that I have when it comes to racial politics is that we separate white and we separate blacks and we separate Latinos like it's a monolith. And it's really not. It's about more often than what they get. I know a whole bunch of white folks that are farmers here in the state of Missouri that have competing political interests. But when it comes to anything dealing with the pork industry, when it comes to anything dealing with CAFOs, when it comes to anything dealing with that industry, they locked in arms because they're like, no, we want the lowest taxation. We want these benefits, A, B, and C. When it comes to our condition, we're not locking hand, but and again, I think that's because we haven't identified the issue, but we're more reflective on the person. I don't care about the person. I want the issue. And now after we get the issue, we can figure out who can talk about the issue the best. But I don't care about the person. That's last. We figure out who can talk the best last. What's the issue? What's the nut and bolts? And after we got the nut and bolts, you can't persuade us in a different path. And that goes back to tax laws and taxation and different incentives. Poor areas bleed more than non-poor areas because we don't really elect poor people in office. Marginalized communities suffer more because the majority of the times a marginalized representative is not embedded in that community. You know what I'm saying? It has to be embedded, and I'm trying to talk.
I see what you're saying. Oh man, that's real talk, man.
I mean, at the end of the day, and I'm 40 now. So my mentality is a little different. When I was 18, 19, 20, you could tell me certain things. I'd have been in office for a long time. And I have never sold out. You can't even find somebody to be like, man, he did. Nah, bro, I haven't. The same when you talk about the issues that I fight for. You can't find anybody that says, oh, that issue wouldn't benefit us. Now you'll find a whole bunch of people that will say, we didn't know you worked on that. And that's problematic, right? When I was at the state, I worked on the law that would certify and bond anybody that's in corrections. That means anybody that's locked up will get a certification and bonded. I'm gonna use JD as an example. I came in here, he was cutting hair. And he doesn't only film, he actually cuts, right? In the state of Missouri, it takes 2,500 hours to become a certified barber. How many cats is locked up right now that has surpassed that 2,500 hours to be a certified barber that comes out with no certification? The same with working with chemicals or working with metal work or anything in there.
Right.
Why is this important? It's important because it transforms the institution. An institution that we says because a catch-all for secondary slavery now becomes a force-fed certification entity. Nobody's gonna want that. You ain't gonna want a cat that goes into jail for IT theft coming out as an IT director. No, they don't want that because that breaks the institution.
Right.
But again, that goes back to us understanding policy and what benefits us and how do we get ourselves out of this situation. We can't blame anybody. If you send your kids to school, you can't be mad at the curriculum that they give because you send them there. Public education, if it was founded during the first Reconstruction, and we said we was just free, and then they destroyed Black Wall Street and everything else that we created, why would an education system be pure? The same when we talk about banking, right? Why would a banking system be pure? It wouldn't. Now, I don't have the fix on collective banking. I know it needs to happen. I don't know all the regulations with that, though.
Right.
But I know it needs to happen. But housing and other stuff, I can give you some regulations.
Right.
Banking ain't.
You know, let me say this, man. This just hit me. So when we look at laws, right? I thought this was very interesting. You know, so we have white men or white patriots, right? As they call themselves, white patriots. You know, they can march up on a city hall, guns and rifles, everything, right? Yeah. And I tried to brainstorm and try to figure this out myself. And no repercussions. Matter of fact, you know, I think there was an incident where during one of the protests, one of the peaceful protests, you know, shots was fired. You know, white man was seen carrying a gun, and the officer pulled up. "Excuse me, sir, is somebody shot over here in the area?" And he's there with his rifle in his hand. And they drive past. So it's these type of antics that make me question. I'm like, okay, so if these people were of another persuasion, you know, if it was us marching up on City Hall, demanding to be able to peacefully protest, or for us to be able to be served and protected by police to eliminate police brutality, we with our guns or whatever the case may be. And if I'm not mistaken, is Missouri an open carry state?
Yep, open carry
okay.
and council doctrine.
Yeah, okay. Missouri is an open carry state. So it made me want to question, why is it such a threat if I carry a gun? You know, it's easy for me to be issued a misdemeanor for whatever reason, but this person,
identity.
You see what I'm saying?
Identity. It was a rep. I'm actually gonna give y'all his name. Rowden. We sit in the committee, and we get to arguing. This is at the state level, and I come to him like, "Dude, your district is 99.9% white. You're not gonna understand what I'm saying." He's like, "What do you mean?" I said, "Dude, you police in the 99.9% white district. Everybody that you come into contact with, you know. It's not the same with ours." Now, he came from a totally different community. After a couple of years, he started understanding my insight with policing, because he used to be a police officer.
Right.
I said all that to go to identity. The average black person or law enforcement person, an average black person don't live in the same community. The average community is policed by police officers that don't live in that area. Their only identifying factor is imagery of that community. whether that's imagery on TV, whether that's imagery in media, or whether that's imagery in some of the citation calls that I get, right? But I don't know Zoe, I don't know you, I don't live in your community, I don't even understand culturalistic cues. I see you with a gun, I immediately think of the imagery. He's a thug, he's a gang member, whoop-de-whoop. It's the same when we see a white guy in suspenders with a beer belly and some jeans. You don't think doctor. That's not the first thought that comes in your head, right? It's imagery. So when we look at the fundamental laws and reserves, reserves need to be added in here too. In America, I think this is part of our separation and differences. With Kyle Reinhardt, or however you say his name, he shot what, 3 or 4 people up there?
Yeah.
Right. He shot 3 or 4 people. Police rolled by. I have no excuse for that. No excuse. Police rolled by in the whole 9. But then he gets bailed out, right? So my point of this, when it comes to identity and like-mindedness, $1 million bail. They bailed him out. Now we got George Floyd getting choked out on the ground. Cameras in front of him. We talk about police brutality has been filmed since the second Reconstruction, since the Civil Rights era. The dog hoses, the whole 9, right? So we got the cameras out. Oh, get off of them. Get off of them. This is bad. Get off of them. No reserve. Nobody stopped it. Nobody intervened.
Right.
Now with those Americans that call themselves patriots, there's a belief reserved there, right? We believe that they're going to take them M16s and they're going to go suicide by cop if they try to violate their constitutional rights, right? That's a fundamental belief, and even a mantra in some of the organizations. Well, let's go back over here in our community. Well, we know that the resolve isn't there because we're going to keep talking about it. So sometimes the resolve breaks down into reality. It's easy to run up on somebody black with a pistol in their hand and violate their constitutional rights because the average black person isn't going to use their all reserve. You talked about Missouri being a stand your ground state. It's a stand your ground state and it's a Castro Doctrine state. So, give you an example of the law. 2017, 2016, when we passed it, I actually stood up on the floor and I endorsed stand your ground. Everybody got quiet. What is wrong with you, Ellington? You know how many black people have died in states who stand your ground? I was like, yeah, I know. I said, but you know the problem with that is that we're not utilizing the law. Because what the law says is if I feel threatened, I can preemptively protect my life. I don't have to use equal force. So if we look at the calculation of how many black and brown bodies we've seen on the ground from law enforcement, I have a natural fear of law enforcement. I can naturally use this law. That's what it says. But now that takes it to the extremities. That takes it to an extreme reserve, but it also changes interactions. And I think until we show dedicated reserves, like you can't do this and expect anything other to happen. The majority of the Black Lives protests this summer have been extremely violent. And they've also been majority white. Difference in reserve. Right? If we show that same difference in reserve, I think you start seeing things different. The same with weapons. Castile, shot in the car. Murder. It's legal for him to have a gun. The whole argument that we heard was, why did he get shot with a gun? He shouldn't, he was reaching for, well, that shouldn't even be a question. If he had a gun or not, he's legal to have a gun. No questions asked. No arguments. None. You go to jail. You violated his constitutional rights being able to have that gun. But we allowed the argument of a black man with a gun to be predominant. It don't even matter. This state legal to have a gun. The same with defense. Aubrey, he shouldn't have been murdered like he was murdered. Right? Mike Brown shouldn't have been murdered like he was murdered. Eric Gardner shouldn't have been murdered like he was murdered. All of these live on TV. All of these justified underneath the law. But going back to Cal, he goes to jail, $1 million bond. It's reserved. So we have to protect those that are willing to be our freedom fighters, and we have to be willing to show a reserve. I keep a pistol with me. I know law enforcement have an issue with me having a pistol on me, but you can't touch mine. I walk around with shoulder holsters on. You can't touch mine. Like, I'm not even gonna have this conversation with you, because I ain't did nothing illegal. And if you try to touch mine, I'm gonna defend myself. Now, when I talk like this, people say, well, you talking crazy. Well, this is how I grew up. I grew up in the inner city knowing that I have to deal with you. And if I gotta deal with you, I'm gonna deal with you, right? And it should be the same across the board when we talk about protecting our kids, protecting our women, protecting our family.
Absolutely.
And utilizing constitutional rights, not being anti, right? Because it's not being anti. Legally, I have the right to carry it. So I think the differences that you see is the belief in reserve. You don't see black men standing outside with AK-47s with the reserve that we're not going to leave, because legally I can do this. And if you try to violate this, I'm going to use all of my legal rights. Now, we see it with the other race all day long. It was, oh man, they're crazy. Are they though? Because legally, I watch social media videos all day long with interaction between white and black people. And I always find it interesting how aggressive they can get and how non-aggressive we get. Always very interesting. And we typically get beat up in the non-aggressive situations. The more aggressive situations, literally, a black is like, hold on, bro, why are you talking so bold? Because I know my rights, bro. And I'm not gonna break. And again, that goes back to Malcolm: civil rights versus human rights. We have human rights. We have certain laws that are here to protect us, and stand your ground can be extremely beneficial to black folks, but we don't utilize it.
Right. I agree with you, man.
Like,
Councilman.
But I did stand up on the floor. It was funny.
So, okay, let everybody know how we can follow you, man. How we can, follow what you're doing, how we can get involved with some of the organizations that you're involved with. Because like I said, I think you're a great person, man, to really, at least for people to get a chance to meet, and the things that you do are totally honest and totally beneficial to the community. So how can we get a hold of you? How can we follow you?
The easiest way is Brandon.Ellington, KCMO.org. And again, I'm asking people to join the No More Excuses Coalition. You email me, I give you all the information. With the No More Excuses Coalition, we're working on culture and what is systemic. And there is no excuses. There is no excuses for us not having anything and controlling our own destiny. There is none. So that's the best way, and we're looking for people that are trying to do something. I'm coming, no excuses though. I can't walk outside because they won't let me.
I hear you, man. Look, man, I love you, man. Glad to have you, bro. All right, man. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah.
We appreciate you. And that concludes our show for this evening. We'd like to thank our guests, our staff, our sponsor, and our supporters for their contributions. But most importantly, we'd like to thank you, our viewers. Be sure and tune in for our next broadcast and follow us online. Thank you. Good night. Would you or someone you know like to be a guest on Listen Up? If so, give us a call at area code 816-535-1081. That's area code 816-535-1081. Or better yet, email us at listenupblackpeople@gmail.com.